What's up guys, welcome back to the channel. This week we're back with some hard industrial techno, this time with Raxeller. So I'm gonna be showing you all the elements that you've just heard in the preview. I've used as a reference the 3 tracks that you have here on the screen, and be sure to get the product file in the link in the description if you want it to follow along the tutorial. Thank you so much for the support, here we go. Alright, so for my kick I've been using layering as usual. I have actually 2 parts for the kick. I have first this one and a second part with another top kick. So as usual I'm using group processing and lots of layers. So for the group processing I have some distortion on the group and some EQ. I'm gonna keep it to present the different layers. First I have a main kick. So this is already a process kick, but basically here I'm having a punch. I have another punch here, something pretty distorted, and I'm using the offbeat only at the end so that I have a bit of movement on my whole kick. Then I have other punches, more like a hardcore snare, and then lots of layers of grit, some noise, and a rumble. So I'm using some process samples here. I don't have so much processing. Here the punch, I just cut the low end. Then my punch kick, here there's a bit of processing. I'm using those Percs layers from TKNVLT. What I do is I use those punches, but I actually pitch down the sample. So at the beginning it's like a very punchy and already a bit distorted sample, but I want something even darker. So I pitch it down and then I reduce only to get the punch. I don't want the offbeats on this one. I combine these two. I make sure I don't have the lows. I redraw a bit of that resonancy. Adding some reverb. Lots of distortion, so that's how I create this kind of hardcore snare. It's really like creating a resonancy with an EQ, then you put it a saturation, and then again putting another. I have just a bit of dynamic EQ so that the punch sits right. So all together already have punch. So for the grit, I'm using those impacts with the pedal and lots of fuzz. So it's like a reverb that's really distorted. It creates that grit. I have another one, but I do it with a kick. I think it's, yeah, pitched down. So at first it's a kick, I pitch it down again to create those nasty noise. Then I have a rumble. So this one is from a Samplepack, but I'm only using very low end, and then some noise. All of this together creates something very full. I'm distorting it, so I'm using the trash blues driver and also this one, delicate harmonics. And then I have to EQ a lot. It was really resonating, especially here, some muddiness, back some punch with that EQ. And I actually recorded it, put it in audio, and then I just added another EQ with those EQs. Really to get something more clean, putting an Oxford inflator on top of it, limiting. And I'm just adding another top kick layer. It's really slight and actually have a variation at the end of each bar. So I have, yeah, some slight variation in the kicks. Playing around with those 8s kick. And I'm adding actually like a hardcore snare. So at first it's this kind of sample. It's a hardcore fill. And I'm adding it. So it's actually adding a bit more room and a bit more punch. That's pretty much it for this kick. So then I have my drums. So for the drums, I have two kind of drums. So I have either some really simple patterns. So like this open hat, this hi-hat. But I have also more like noisy, very distorted and industrial kind of hats. I'm gonna show you how to do this. So first for the open hat, I wanted something noisy still. So I'm combining two layers. This one that's with a bit of transient, so I'm controlling the compression here with that envelope. I'm distorting it, also adding the drum bass to add a bit of that compression. And then you see it was very heavy in that frequency area, so you had to push it down a bit. I'm adding a room and I'm sidechaining. I have this other one, which is more like resonating here, and both together creating that kind of drum. So I'm using pretty much the same processing on this one. Then I'm still EQing on top, also withdrawing some resonances with the D-Res. So you see it was very heavy here, so I had to push it down. And I'm also adding another reverb. This one is more like a short. It's adding that hairy feeling. So this is the first drum. And I have another one, which is pretty straightforward. It's hi-hats. So I'm withdrawing that attack with this envelope, adding that Hallucinazione preset, and just EQing. Again, it was very heavy here at the 10K area, sidechaining and bringing slowly that hi-hat in the track. And then I have those hi-hats, so very distorted. So how to make these? I'm using here some drum loops, so Vengeance loops, on which I'm adding some amp, so it really creates that saturated feeling. So at first the loop was longer, but I'm putting it shorter, like a half a bar. I'm just duplicating like this. So you see it's pretty much like some Percs initially, but when you add those amps, it really creates those resonances and that noisy, gritty feeling that's very industrial. Sidechaining, doing the same with another loop here. But this time I'm adding some grand delays and lots of amp. I actually have 2. So without the effect, it's again another loop. You see, just some drums. Already creating this, I could have kept it like this, but I wanted to create something a bit more moving and more noisy. So you can play around with the grand delay and create those interesting textures. And then you have to bring back the noise with that amp. And then you have to control all of those resonances, of course. Make sure it's not too harsh. Sidechaining and merging the two together. And it creates that texture. And having another one, this time I didn't use a loop, but I'm actually using like this snake tool. So I'm putting a Perc loop in the sampler mode, and you have to put it in the slice mode. So it will create those little slices. And when it's going to play like randomly here in the MIDI pattern, it's going to trigger the different slice of the sample. And it's going to play randomly each of these Perc in a random way. And I'm adding again those amps to create that noise and very industrial feeling. So without it, it's just some random Percs, but here you already create like the noise. And then I'm recording it, so that's what I did here, that small part. And I just added more movement with some delay and some reverb. So without it, you see it's a small part that I cutted, that I duplicate. And then I create that movement with those effects. And on this one, I just use another loop, I guess, a very short loop. So yeah, it's a good way to be creative. You can either use that snake or Wurzer or whatever sequencer that's going to trigger those samples that are slice, some Perc loops, at loops. I could have put also this. And it's just going to create another kind of noise. You put lots of distortion, pedal, amp, rock mode, heavy mode, whatever. It's going to create those noisy, very texturized industrial loops. Then you record, you take the part that you like, and you can duplicate and create those textures. And you can also put different layers, and all of that together is going to create those interesting patterns. And that's pretty much it for the hats. I then have some Perc loops. So for the Percs, I'm using again 2 ways. So here it's just a sample that I liked. It's pretty much like a 16 pattern Perc loop. But you have also some kind of movement and some velocity movement, you see. Also some delay. And on top of that, I'm using a break kind of Perc loop. So using that pattern, I'm distorting again, so overdrive, amp, whatever, creating the room with the Valhalla Vintage and sidechaining, and all of this together kind of interacts and creates something that's like tac 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 tac, and together with the kick it works well. And create that kind of groove, and with the hi-hat pretty cool. So that's it for the perks. I then have some Foleys. So this is basically some weird sounds that are recorded and it's making a background for my track. So I have two kind of layers. I have first this layer of Foley that's pretty gentle, but it creates some textures, some noise in the background. So it's just some Foleys without... You can add the reverb, and you can actually do that in your kitchen, just recording some stuff or whatever in your room with some objects. So I have something here in the background. It's pretty loopy and it's accompanying the kick. And then I'm bringing some more random kind of effects in the background. So I have this one, which is a kind of sweep. This one with some harmonics this time, and it's kind of perc with some harmonics. And I have this one. And I'm trying to put them, so this one is every 4 bars, it's placed like this one also, but at the end of the bar, and this one is like in between. So I'm kind of having those two layers of background effects, and I could have also added some random effects here and there to bring some things in the background. It's really giving that industrial vibe. And then I have this sweep up. Each time I have some variation, so it's just a noise sweep. That's pretty industrial. And I'm having my leads. So first the lead is the vocal.
Isn't safe to go inside. Isn't safe to go inside. Isn't safe to go inside.
So it's kind of a robotic voice, a bit distorted thanks to the amp. I'm having also the room with the reverb and the delay.
Isn't safe to go inside.
It's really like
Isn't safe to go inside. Isn't safe to go inside. Isn't safe to go inside.
Playing with the kick. So this is my first lead on the first part of the track. Then I'm bringing slowly, first with the Atmo. I'm kind of anticipating the choir that is coming. So this Atmo is just a bar like this that's being played in the sampler in sustain mode. So at first the choir is very more like a vocal, but I'm adding lots of saturation with the lead or heavy bass or rock mode. Also a long, very long reverb, of course, because I want like a kind of pad Atmo. I'm adding again another amp to bring it up, sidechaining, and a bit of an auto pan here, the phase to 0 and the rate to 1/16, and it creates that. I could have also put an automation here at the end. So I'm bringing the chord with this Atmo. So for the chord, I'm using a sample here and playing around with 4 notes in the key of the track, alternating each bar. And again, I'm adding that very saturated feeling thanks to the amp. So without it, you see it's a bit clean. And I'm adding on purpose this very saturated feeling. I think he does this a lot in his tracks, bringing that kind of vibe. So here, just saturating a bit the core, controlling the very high end that was too resonating, adding that very long reverb, adding lots of delay. I'm creating a kind of pad in the background, adding that effect, and then again just a bit of EQ and sidechaining, and that's my core. And finally I have a lead. So this one is more like in the style of these latest tracks that I did like a few months ago. So it's kind of synth, but again, is adding those very saturated feeling. So you see at first it's a very random synth, but I create lots of noise, saturation, distortion, whatever you want to call it. And then just creating that big room. Sidechaining, bit of EQ, And this creates my last part. As I'm bringing the percs, the hats, withdrawing them, first with that drop with the synth. And then bringing back again the hi-hats, the hats, even the vocal, but this time I'm adding again with the pitch down button.
Isn't safe to go inside.
It's more like in the background at that time. So yeah, that's the kind of lead that you can do. So either it can be very straightforward, hard industrial techno, like just a kick, some hi-hats. Sometimes it's very percussive, with just a few elements in the background. And sometimes he has more like straightforward leads that really appears like this one. You also have lots of core and this kind of darkness in his tracks. So yeah, very interesting style. Let me know what you think in the comments. Thank you for the support and I see you in the next one.